Okay, thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate you coming to the webinar to learn a little bit more about Wholesum. I imagine we'll get a few more stragglers coming in over the next few minutes. I'll walk through a little bit of an introduction here before we start and can give you an overview of what to expect. I'll do my best to keep this as brief as we can. I know everybody's got busy days and whatnot. But first, I wanted to just start by thanking you for attending. It looks like I looked at the attendee list. It looks like we've got a lot of folks from the university sector, campus recreation and outdoor programs, and a handful of outfitters as well. So it looks like we can chat mostly from that standpoint. And it seems like we're all in the same general field. So if you're able to see my screen, and I hope you are, I've got basically three sections that I was hoping to cover today. One is just very quickly to talk about Wholesum in general, why it exists, how long we've been around, and what we're up to, and then jump into the basics of meal planning. Fundamentally, it's a really simple program to use, and it's pretty darn intuitive. And finally is to jump into some of the more advanced features. Each one of these is sort of optional, and you can opt to add them on and add a small amount of complexity to add more power to your meal planning. And every user just decides to use varying levels of these. So I'm just going to walk through some of those that you may or may not find helpful. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions and some conversations about Wholesum and about menu planning for groups in general. And I will share my screen in a moment to walk through the actual platform so that you'll get a chance to see what it looks like for those of you that haven't started with the free trial already. So just quickly to start with about Wholesum. Looks like I've got a question here. Let me just check in to make sure we're good. Yes, it is possible to receive the presentation for future reference. I'll do my best to share the recording here after the webinar is finished. So about Wholesum, my wife and I actually started Wholesum about 3.5-4 years ago. She and I both had worked in different sectors that involved a fair bit of menu planning for groups, and we were often wrestling with the complexity that comes with that. When you've got a group of 10, 15 people, they're going out for 5 to 10 days, and there's increasingly more and more dietary restrictions that we have to consider. And it just became one of the more challenging elements of our work. In my case, that was for a time with a campus rec at a university in Minnesota, and as well as for sort of an outfitter, an environmental education outfitter in Montana, which is where I'm based now. And in both cases, planning menus is not really the focus of our job, but it became a really large part of it and became a huge time drain. We also ended up with a lot of wasted food and a lot of wasted money because of that. We'd end up over purchasing. And over the course of those 10 years or so, I had built many different spreadsheets and access databases that did the trick. They were effective and they helped. They made things better, but none of them were ever really as effective as I had hoped them to be. They were not always that user-friendly. They were easy to break, and it was kind of hard to bring on new staff and train them in to use it effectively. And it was hard to manipulate to add new recipes or new options or new features because they were built in such rigid ways. And so, 3 or 4 years ago, we started on this process of building Wholesum to kind of borrow from each one of those spreadsheets and database elements that we used over the years to try to make it a more user-friendly and flexible environment that could work for a lot of different organizations. So that's basically the background of what brought us here. It's been a really fun process. It started in a really simple way. What I'm going to walk through here in the introduction and the basic menu planning for the first year or two, that's essentially what we were looking at. But as more users started joining and every organization has their own workflow and process, we had requests for different features to do different things. And so some of what I'll show you in the second half of the presentation here is in response to some of those, kind of adding new features and functions to make sure that everyone's business process could effectively work well within Wholesum. So that is essentially the About Us. And with that, I'll dive in to kind of the basic menu planning. And I'll run through that really quickly and show you kind of how to create recipes, how to manage your ingredients, and then how to create menus and shopping lists and some of those tools. And maybe we can pause for a few questions at that time, and then I'll jump. That might lead us pretty naturally into some of the more advanced Wholesum tools, namely automatic accommodation of dietary restrictions. That is a big one. Rounding ingredients to make sure that we've got the right round numbers. There's some advanced exporting and manipulation we can do there that can really help with planning. And then some of the other more unique features like batch recipes and multiple users. I'll get into that in a little bit. So with that, let me jump into Wholesum and start sharing with you the introduction to basic menu planning. So for those of you that haven't started on the trial or haven't seen Wholesum at all, what you're looking at here is basically the homepage of what you'll see when you first log in. And this is the dashboard from which you can access everything. In general, Wholesum happens, the process here happens in 3 steps. The first is building out your recipes. What are the meals that you serve on a regular basis to your groups? As you build that out, it's going to automatically create this long list of ingredients, of all of the ingredients that you might use in all of the meals. And that's step 2, is sort of managing those ingredients. That's an optional step, but it'll allow you to have a little bit more power in your planning. And in that step, that's where we're going to define the store where we purchase, how much it costs, what department it's found in. If you want to make notes on the brand that you typically purchase or those sorts of things, that'll happen in that ingredient step. And both of those tend to be mostly upfront work. So you'll take a little bit of time to spell out the list of recipes. Depending on how many recipes you have, it might take anywhere from half an hour to a few hours to do that, and then to define some ingredients up front. And then the third step and the final step is these 2 bottom buttons, which is basically where you'll spend most of your time once that upfront work has been accomplished. And that is planning out the actual menus and meal plans for the groups that you've got coming up, so that you can generate shopping lists and you can come up with some quantities that you need for packing or for purchasing. So with that, I'll jump into the first step here, which is recipes. When you first start, this will be a blank list. So it starts as a blank slate. I've made this account just to demonstrate kind of what can be. And I've started with a small number of recipes, 20 or 30 of them in here. And as I mentioned, it will be blank to start with. And you can start by entering your own recipes. So I'll start by just deleting a simple one and making it from scratch again here. Bagels and cream cheese. You'll name it, you'll define the serving size. And the way in which this comes in handy, it'll make sense in a moment, but basically we want to define a standard quantity. It's not particularly important because this will be scaled up and down later. But as I build this recipe out, just like any recipe, it'll give you a sense of how many people it feeds. So in this case, we'll say it's for 10, and we'll say 10 whole bagels. And you can see as I start searching, it'll look for existing ingredients in other recipes that might be a match, and we'll say bagels. And it found the store and the cost assigned with that already. And I will say 1 tub, and you'll see different units here. There's whole, which are sort of individual non-quantitative amounts, weights and volumes as well. And we'll go with 1 whole tub of cream cheese. Great, so that'll be a new ingredient that we're adding. And so to come back to this serving size, this basically allows you to divide out the amount per serving. So we can say that 10 bagels is for 10 people. And again, this will be scaled up and scaled down in the last step, so that if you had 15 people, it would know to bring 15 bagels. We can define some of the dietary restrictions that are in there, add some recipe instructions if it's helpful to send out with your guides or instructors, or those that are out doing the actual cooking. You can give some pointers for how to cook this meal, and then also assign some meal categories. I'll spend a little bit more time later on the dietary restrictions. In the most simple version of this, I'll show you it's basically going to be a flag that calls your attention to the fact that this has wheat or gluten. It's not going to do anything to automatically restrict you from using it or change out the ingredients. And then you can add some custom tags if you'd like to as well. So that's basically it. I've made a new recipe, bagels and cream cheese, in here. And you'll see this long list grow as you continue adding to that. You can also filter it down to just show what breakfast options you have and what dinner options you have and whatnot. So as you do that, that's basically step one. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's pretty darn straightforward. And step two is the ingredient details. So I'll jump to this really quickly. This, again, is the long list of all of the ingredients that exist in all of your recipes. I've gone ahead and populated some of these other columns. So you can add the store that you purchase it in, the department where it's found. This is from an existing list. You can add notes about where it's purchased or what brand it's purchased, or instructions for the purchaser and instructions for the packing. This field can also be used to track inventory if you want to stay on top of it that closely, or to just note that the inventory should be checked or check the basement, those sorts of things. The advantage of adding the store and the department, in addition to just giving a little bit more instruction, is that when we finally make the shopping list for a group, you'll have the opportunity to pull that list specifically for one store. The final list will automatically be sorted by store and by department, so you can really streamline your shopping. And you can also pull lists just by department and those sorts of things. If you want to, not everybody does this, but if you want to, you can also use the cost estimate tool. So you can see this check mark means I've already assigned a cost. And we'll basically say, well, we purchased this by the dozen, so 12 whole bagels cost us $3. And that will roll up so that you can get a sense of what your menu should cost for a multi-day event. You can also see what each meal costs and identify the cost per person as you need to, if you want to use the cost estimates, that is. So that's basically it. You'll take some time there. If this is too long of a list, we can just zoom in on one of the recipes. So in this case, bagels and cream cheese. This is the one that I just made. And you can make your notes. Buy onion bagels. Whatever is relevant for your work. So that's step two. Again, these two just happen up front. You'll take some time defining the recipes and take some time defining the ingredient details, and then you'll be ready to go. The final step, and this is sort of the fun part, is your actual menus and meal plans. So here again, this will be blank when you start. I've got 3 created here just as some examples to play with, but we'll go ahead and start to create a new meal plan. So this would be when you're ready to actually start planning for a group that you've got coming to work with. So in this case, you name it, and you can say sample meal plan. You'll define the number of individuals that are part of that group. You can, if you'd like to, do that by appetite size. So in the event that you've got a bunch of hungry teenage boys, you can add them to this column, to this cell. And if you've got a bunch of little kids, you can add them to this cell. If you don't want to get that detailed, you can go from here. And basically what will happen in the end is it'll scale up and scale down the quantities based on the appetite size here. So here we can just say we've got 15 people. You can make some notes about the group just for your own internal reference. In its most simplest form, this is the dietary restrictions tool, where we can say, all right, we've got somebody with a wheat or gluten allergy on this trip. And that will just come up as a flag when we start adding meals to our meal plan. I'll show you the more advanced version of that in a minute. And then this is basically the final step here, which is to create your actual meal plan. So on the right, you've got this grid. We can define the dates or the number of days on here. So in this case, a 4-day event or trip, and your different categories, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And on the left, these are all of the meals that we've created in that first step. And what we'll do here is just build out your menu. This can be filtered down by category. So if you just want to look at lunch meals, you can drop those in. This little yellow flag is the thing that's telling me, hey, this recipe has an ingredient that that is somebody in your group has a dietary restriction that conflicts with this. So this is just letting you know, hey, heads up, this might not work for that group, or at least for that individual. And I'll just build this out real fast to make this go. Let's see, this will be a pretty boring meal plan for them. You can add multiples as well. So in this case, maybe we want to have, mac and cheese and the quesadilla option. Or you can have bagels and peanut butter and jelly and bagels and cream cheese there. And you can add as many of those as you'd like to. And then the final step is basically to define how many people are eating these. So this is what we've come up with. By default, everybody, all 15 people, will be eating that meal. If for some reason somebody won't be eating that meal, either because they've departed early from the trip or that because you are having a substitute meal to deal with a dietary restriction, or you're giving options and half the group will choose one option and half will choose the other, you can, in this case, say, okay, well, only 10 people are going to have that and 5 people will have that. You can go through the list to define those specific quantities, and that too will scale back the amount, the quantities that are needed for that recipe. And that is it. So we've saved our meal plan. There's a few ways to view the final product. The PDF seems to be one of the more popular ways to view this, and I'll run through that, and then I'll run through a few other options that we might have. So this is the PDF output of our meal plan. It will show us exactly what we need for each ingredient. This is going to be aggregated by meal as well. So in this example, for example, we're looking at peanut butter and jelly as one meal and bagels with peanut butter and jelly as another meal. And it will tell us the entire amount that we need for that trip, 6.5 jars. Similarly here, we have French toast here and peanut butter and jelly here, and it'll tell us the entire quantity that we need. We need 6.38 loaves of bread. When I mentioned the rounding rules, that will allow us to kind of clean up some of these quantities if that is problematic for you. Obviously, you're not going to be that granular with your selection of how many loaves of bread to bring. So if you want to round that up or round that down, there are ways to do that as well. You'll see the cost for this aggregated as well, based on the cost estimates that you put in. And this will be the entire shopping list for the entire 4 days that we put in there. The next page will actually give you a summary of what we put in there. So we've got bagels and PB&J for 5 people, bagels and cream cheese for 10. And here's the menu plan overall. And then it will also give you each recipe. So in this case, here's mac and cheese for 15 people. It's got the instructions that we typed in there. And then it's also got the quantities that are needed for that specific meal. So that can be helpful as well in the case that we're serving mac and cheese 2 or 3 times on this trip. It'll break it out each time so you know above how much you need for the ingredients in total, and then down here you'll see the actual quantities for just one meal of that for 15 people. So that's basically it. There are a few other ways to view this and interact with this. One is the Excel spreadsheet, in case this gets you 95% of the way there, but you still want to manipulate it. This will spit it out into a spreadsheet format that you can sort differently, you can manipulate, you can change the quantities or add things. You'll also notice different tabs at the bottom. And what this allows for you to see is the actual quantities used each day. So on February 6th, we're going to be using these ingredients. On February 7th, we're using these ingredients. For many organizations, that's not particularly useful to know, but if you're packing by day, this can be a helpful tool for packing purposes. And that's that. You can also see most of this here just on the web interface and interact with it, in that you can check off what's already been purchased or what you already have in stock, however you'd like to use that. This will flow through to the shopping list as well, so that you can actually check off items on the PDF. And then the final way that you can interact with this is that there is an iPhone and Android app that will basically show you this shopping list so that you can run through it at the store and check things off. That can be helpful in particular if you've got multiple people shopping for a bigger group, so that they can go to the store with multiple devices and check off what's been purchased and kind of divide out the list and streamline it there. You'll notice in all of these cases, as I mentioned, it's going to be sorted by store and then by department so that you can see, here's what we need to buy at Albertsons, here's what we need to buy at Costco, at the farmer's market, and whatnot. So that, I think, is it. I think that's the basic intro to your recipes, your ingredients, and your meal plans. And I'm ready to dive into some of the more detailed features that are optional. But I did want to take some time to see what questions you all have, to see if there's anything that I ran through too quickly that I should review, or any comments you have. So if you're on the phone or on computer, if you can unmute, you're welcome to just chime in with a question.
Say, this is Joe Yuska with Lewis and Clark College.
Hi, Joe.
Question, do you have, like if we send some of our student leaders to the supermarket with us, there's a wide range of jar sizes and tub sizes and bag sizes and package sizes for different ingredients, depending on whether you go to Costco or you go to Albertsons or Safeway. So is there any place in there where you can put, a 6.5 ounce jar or a 15.5 ounce can? Is that an option in setting up your meals?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few ways to deal with that. And the easiest is going to be when you actually name the recipe. So this won't make sense, but I'll add black beans to this bagel and cream cheese recipe. And you can say either 1 whole 6 ounce can of black beans, so that it's actually part of the ingredient name. And that will work just fine, so that the output will then give you a sense of whole cans along with the signs, the size, or, if it's to clean it up a little bit, and then say 6 ounce like that. So that's the most frequent solution. If you want to be more flexible, to give the purchaser some flexibility in the size can that they purchase, you could switch this to a volume and say we need 6 fluid ounces of canned black beans, and that would scale up or scale down to give them the total fluid ounces that they need.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, then if they're doing it for 30 people, it would work fine.
Yeah, exactly. So it may lead them to buy a larger can or a smaller can, depending on the quantities. And as long as that's okay for the kind of group that you have or the kind of trip that you have, that would work as well. Most people find that they're generally buying the same size cans, and they want some consistency there, so that they don't prevent someone buying the giant industrial size can of black beans, even though it's for a week. Once it's opened, it spoils or whatever. So most people end up typing it into the name here. The other option I'll throw out is that this column, it's a little bit of a catch-all, but this purchasing notes column can be really helpful for that as well, where here's our black beans. We can just say, purchase 6 ounce cans, and that will pull into the final list so that it's a note for the purchaser so they know what size can to purchase.
Oh, great. Okay. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, no problem. Other questions out there? Okay, no worries. I hopefully a few more will come up here as I dive into some of these other features. So I'll run through this short list here. Again, it basically, with each additional option that we turn on, there will be a small bit more complexity and setup and use that we'll have, and in return we'll have a bit more power. So if you're looking for the most streamlined and simple version of this, that's what I just demonstrated. And if any of these features that I'm going to show you here seem like they'll help you, you can turn them on. And if it just seems like it's more to think about, and you don't want to mess with it, you don't need to turn them on in the slightest. From this home page, I'll jump away from this, you'll see the settings icon. And this is where you can really manage these things. And you'll see that in almost all cases, I've got all of these settings turned off. And what I'll do really quickly is just turn them on so that you can get a sense of how each one of them could work for you if it's helpful. So one of the most popular ones is this substitute ingredients. So I'm going to turn that one on really fast. And what that will do is if I jump back to my recipes, here's that bagel and cream cheese one that I made a while back. You'll now see the substitute column. And what that allows us to do is I'll say with this bagel, I'll say for individuals who have the following dietary restriction, wheat or gluten, we're going to substitute 10 whole bagels for 10 whole gluten-free bagels. Have it in gluten-free bagels. Great. So now I've added this substitute that's defined for bagels. So anytime we say, hey, we've got one person or two people in our group that can't have gluten, it's going to automatically it's going to subtract some of our bagels and it's going to add in some gluten-free bagels. So it gives you, it's taking the time to set some rules for how you want to deal with those substitutions. The way that translates into the meal plan section, I'll do another meal plan just as an example. We'll say we've got 10 people. And you'll notice now, instead of just the check boxes, we actually have a slider. So we have to define how many people on this trip of the 10 don't eat wheat or gluten. In this case, we'll say 2. And now when I add, this still shows up to say, hey, this contains gluten. But when I add it and create this meal plan, so this is a very simple meal plan. We're just doing breakfast for 10 people for bagels and cream cheese. It will show us that we need to bring 8 bagels and 2 whole gluten-free bagels. So it can be used in many different ways for many different kinds of allergies or dietary restrictions. You can say for the taco bar, instead of ground beef, bring tofu, or for the peanut butter and jelly, bring sunflower butter instead of peanut butter, or whatever it is that you're trying to do to accommodate those different dietary restrictions. So that is that's that tool. Do you have any questions there? That one is maybe one of the ones that might jump out more. Otherwise, I'll wait until the end.
Another question for you. This is Joe.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, can you have like 3 vegans, 2 gluten-free people, 2 lactose intolerant on a trip? Like, is there a limit to how many different dietary restrictions you can have?
No, there's not. There's a limit in this list of meal components. And we've intentionally kind of steered away from vegetarian and vegan because there's so many different nuances to what that means to different people. There's people who will eat all meats, or eat no meats but fish, or there's people who will eat just chicken or whatever it is. So we've actually broken them down. So if you had one person who didn't eat meat but they'll eat fish, for example, you would add one to these cells. So this counts as one person in this case. There's one person that won't eat poultry, and one person that won't eat pork, and that may well be the same person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's a good way to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I know this can be one of the messiest parts of menu planning for sure.
I have another question. This is Corey.
Hey, Corey. Yeah, sure.
So if say I have one vegan and one person who's lactose intolerant, when I designate that substitution for, cream cheese to be a fake cream cheese, can I designate it for multiple dietary restriction categories?
So right now you can only designate it for one category. It's something that's
put it in separately for vegan versus, I guess vegan's not an option anyway, but.
Yeah, in most cases, the ingredients we're talking about only have one ingredient that will pop up. Occasionally There's one that has the potential for two, like this ingredient contains two ingredients.
Right.
Of ingredients.
Yeah.
And there is a workaround that I can share with you if you want to get into that to manage it. It basically requires splitting the ingredient into two ingredients. So, one example that came up the other day is goldfish crackers contain both wheat and cheese.
Right.
And in that situation, if you want to use this tool, right now it's set up to just be one allergen we're substituting it for. If you want to get that granular, basically what you can do is split the ingredient, goldfish crackers in that situation, into two, so that you're adding it twice to the recipe and defining a substitute for it in two different places. And that I'm happy to walk through with you in more detail if you got to that point, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other ones out there? Otherwise I can jump on. Okay, no problem. So let me jump back to the settings page real fast just to walk through some of these other ones. The top one I'll breeze through. Basically, this allows you to define what columns show up in your PDF or your Excel output, as well as a few other things. Ingredient rounding is mostly self-explanatory. If you turn that on, what will change is when you jump to the ingredients page, there's now a rounding rules section. And for those whole unit things like a whole tomato or a whole loaf of bread or a whole bagel, where you don't really want to see that we need 2.75 loaves of bread, you can set up these rounding rules to either to not round, to round up always, to round down always, or just to round naturally to the nearest whole number. And that will carry through to the shopping list and to that final recipe section that you may see. There is a little sub setting that I'll show you. No need to get hung up on this, but if you only want it to show up at the rounding to show up in the shopping list or only in the recipes, you can turn them on and off here separately. And by default, they're both going to be on, which is what most people go for. Another one I'll show that I think can be really powerful is this export customization. And what this will give you is a few things. When I come back to that meal plan that let's see if we can get the internet to work here. When I come back to that meal plan that we just made, that sample meal plan, you'll notice this used to be a PDF and an Excel button separately. And what this will give us is a little bit more flexibility in how we want to see our shopping list. So you can define what you want to see. If you just want the calendar or just the shopping list, you can see just the shopping list for a specific store. So if I do that, it'll just show me the Costco items. And you can also do it by date. So if in the event you had a really long event and you were shopping for it in multiple stages, or if you were packing for it in multiple stages, you could set the dates that you wanted to see the list for as well. Department as well, if you wanted to, some individuals will shop to get all of their dairy and refrigerate all of that together. You can export by department as well. There's one other piece that's actually not required for the export customization, but it's related and it's easy to miss. And it's this little export list button. So right now I'm looking at my list of all of my upcoming trips that I've got planned. And this export list button allows you to aggregate them. So if you wanted to shop for multiple trips at the same time, this is the tool that you would use. So some organizations choose to shop just for their one event, and they do their Costco run just for that event, and some will choose to purchase for all of the upcoming events. So this is where you would decide that you want to shop for all 4 of these together. And when you pull the PDF for that, or the Excel for that, it will aggregate the total quantities that you need for all of them. And then you would subsequently pull the list that you would need for just one of them to separate it out or to pack it, those sorts of things. This can also be a helpful tool for sort of annual planning if you're doing bulk purchasing. So one thing that some organizations choose to do is to build out maybe some like sample meal plans, generally, they say, hey, I know that I'm going to run 7 of these 5-day trips this summer. And so I'm going to buy my bulk items ahead of time. So I'm going to say I want 7 of this type of trip. So it's going to multiply everything by 7. And you can even just go in and say, just show me the bulk things. I'm not sure if I have any bulk on this list, but yeah, it'll give you a sense for what you need for that whole season. So it can be a helpful tool for planning in advance as well if you do any pre-purchasing beforehand. And again, you can do this by store and by department as well. So that is the export customization function. Shut that off, shut that one off. I can breeze through some of these. Packing notes may or may not be helpful for you. Basically, this allows you to define a packing location for each recipe. So if you are if you're doing, this is particularly helpful for whitewater rafting outfitters that have requested this. And you can define what cooler things go into. Sorry, I realized I just missed the chat here. And it says, and how does it account for people who have more than one restriction like people? Oh, that was the example we talked about. Sorry for missing that when you first typed it. Batch recipes is another one. Again, it's like an added level of detail that you can choose or choose not to use. The best way to think about this is to think about a cake. That's what I've found to be helpful. And if you think about most of these recipes that we put in there, you know, if I build a recipe for spaghetti and meatballs for 10 people and I have 15 meatballs, well, I know that I just need to increase those quantities 50% to get enough for 15 people. In the event that it's a cake, and I may have a cake for 10 people, but I've got 15 people coming on this in this group, we don't want to make 1.5 cakes. We actually want to make 2 cakes. And so this batch recipe gives you the power to do that. It can also be really helpful if you're using any Dutch oven style recipes that don't really scale linearly. You're either doing them in 1 batch or you're doing 2 batches or 3 batches, depending on the quantities. And when I turn that on, each recipe will now give you the option to scale by batch. And when that's on, it will essentially, in this case, this won't make sense for bagels and cream cheese, but we're going to bring this quantity no matter what until we get to 11 people, and then it's going to double that quantity. So it just scales by doubling and tripling and so on. So that can be helpful. Another way that I've seen that used, even though it wasn't the original intention, is for planning for your staples. So if you've got salt and pepper and ketchup and the things that you don't really think about in per person quantities, some people will choose to make a recipe, in quotations, a recipe of their staples and have it be a batch style recipe that doesn't really grow or shrink with the number of people. And it just is always a static amount of salt shakers and pepper shakers, those sorts of things. I'll breeze past multiple locations, but basically know that if you operate in multiple sites where there's different grocery stores, it can accommodate that as well, so that you can send people out to shop at different stores depending on where they're based from. And then there's also the option for multiple users. This is certainly not required, even if you've got a large team. You can share one license for Wholesum, and multiple people can log in, multiple people can use it. Basically, the trick with multiple users, the advantage of it is that it will actually restrict access. So if you've got a staff member, a full-time staff member who is managing this system, he or she may take the main license and have full access to everything, but then maybe hypothetically you want your instructors, your guides or whatever to only have access to meal planning. So they can't mess with the recipes, they can't add new recipes, they can't edit ingredient details or the store or the cost. This will allow you to have different users with different levels of access. So that's that tool, and I'll get into it much more than that. There's a question if there's a limit for the number of multiple users. There is no limit. There is an additional cost of $10 per month that the account is active per user. But again, it's possible to share it. So you could have an instructor's account and an admin account or something like that, and you could get by pretty easily with just 2 levels of access if you were able to share that login. So I think that does it. We ran through accommodating dietary restrictions, ingredient rounding, exporting multiple meal plans and lists, customizing that export, batch recipes, and multiple users. And I think we're right on time at 40 after or so. So I just wanted to make sure we had enough space for questions or conversations. One thing I do want to share is that I think Wholesum can work for just about everyone, but I do 100% recognize that Excel and Access might be just as good solutions for you. So I mostly wanted to make sure that we share this as one of the options that can help with menu planning. If you are an organization that's doing ration-based planning, more like pantry style, where it's not meal-focused, sometimes Excel spreadsheets are totally sufficient for that, and this might be more than you need. So that's something to keep in mind. And hopefully Wholesum can help you, but the solutions that are out there that a lot of organizations are using can also do the trick using Excel and Access. Yeah, so any questions or comments, and that can be about Wholesum or about menu planning in general. I'd love to just open it up to anyone and everyone.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
This is Kim from Utah Valley University. So if you're creating your recipe and you're creating it for 10 people, and you put in all of the ingredients and everything, so when you go in again and you say, okay, I have 15 people, will it recalculate that? Or do you have to put those in?
You won't have to change it at the recipe level. So in the example, like bagels and cream cheese, we've got 10 people eating 10 bagels. And when I make my meal plan, I'll just edit this one for 15 people. It will scale up for the amount that is needed for 15 people. And I've got the substitutes on, so there's that gluten-free bagels as well, but you can see that there's 15 bagels total. So okay. There's no need to edit the recipes once they're in there. The times that I've seen people edit recipes that can be helpful is if you're consistently coming back with too many bagels or you're going out with not enough bagels. That's the time when you come back and edit the recipe to say, you know what? 10 bagels isn't enough for 10 people. So we're going to actually change this to 12. And when we save this, it's going to flow through to all of the meal plans to say for every 10 people, bring 12 bagels.
Okay. And then, yeah, that's awesome. And then when you have mayonnaise, a jar of mayonnaise, and you only need 1, how do you put that in as a batch? Is that where that comes in?
But in this case, the cream cheese is probably pretty similar where we say we need 1 tub per 10 people. Is that an example that's similar to what you're...
Well, say you're using cream cheese and you're using just that 1 tub for multiple meals.
Yeah. Okay. I think I see what you're saying. Let me show, oops, here we go. Bagel test. In this case, it's going to tell us, because we've got 15 people, it's going to tell us we need 1.5 tubs. Mm-hmm. And if this went up even higher, or if we added this multiple times, like maybe we're having bagels and cream cheese for lunch as well, it will show us that we need 3 now. It'll show us that we need to buy 3, but we're going to use 1.5 here, and we're going to use 1.5 here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. I guess you just would only put it, if you say you got a thing of mayonnaise, you wouldn't have to put, if you were only using half of it, right, then you would put half for the next meal, and then you just know that you just need to buy 1, right? Yeah,
exactly. And if it's something that that spoils or something like that, so in this case, cream cheese, if you don't want this, if this was 3 days later that you're serving bagels and cream cheese again, you need 1.5 tubs here and 1.5 tubs here. And you maybe don't want to leave this second tub open for 3 or 4 days. That's where the rounding rules can come in really handy. And so you can make sure that you're always rounding up at the recipe level so that you're actually going to need to bring 4 tubs of cream cheese, not 3.
Okay.
If you're able to decipher that from looking at this, then it's not necessary to use rounding rules. Otherwise, it should do the trick. Yeah.
Okay. And then can you export, like, so you already have some of this in place, but not in this type of program. Can you cut and paste and put it in, and so you don't have to retype the whole thing?
Right now, no. They all have to come in manually. It goes surprisingly quickly. I've done it for an organization manually with, gosh, maybe 100 plus recipes, and it just took 2 or 3 hours to do that. If you're quick at going through. There is a way to import them from allrecipes.com. I won't get into that now, but basically you just paste the URL for the recipe here and it'll pull it in. So that can be another quick way to build out the recipes, as long as you're diligent about maintaining the same naming conventions in your ingredients.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions out there?
Oh, could you do the
Yeah.
Joe Yiska, Lewis and Clark again?
Yeah.
Could you do a quick example of a rounding thing?
Sure. So let's do the bagels and cream cheese in that case. So we don't want to deal with partial tubs of cream cheese, right? So I would jump into ingredients. If I don't want to scroll through all of these, I can just look at the bagels and cream cheese. So here are the 3 ingredients that might come up there. Oops, I've got to turn on the rounding rules. Sorry about that. So I'm going to turn on ingredient rounding, jump back to, refresh here, jump back to the ingredients. And then, so we've got this rounding rules on. Right now, we're not rounding at all. And in this case, we can define to say, let's always round up, right? So even if we need 1.2 tubs of cream cheese, it's going to tell us that we need to bring 2. And so now when I come back into the, to make a meal plan with bagels for 15 people, let's do this again. One small thing too you'll note is this little number here will tell you how many times it's being served, in case that's helpful. And as I click save here, it will round up to tell me I need to bring 2 tubs. So really, we're going to go through 1.5 tubs, but it's going to tell me I need 2 here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have another question. This is Corey at Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
If I want to copy a whole meal plan for another trip, say, the same trip the next year, is there a way to do that and then perhaps make small edits, for instance, different dietary needs?
Yeah, there is. So there's this clone function on each meal plan. So for example, in the sample meal plan, if I click that clone button, you will now see the sample meal plan copy. So we've got 2 now, and you can just hop in here and edit it. You can change the dates, change the number of people, adjust the dietary restrictions and what meals are being served. So that's an easy way to do it. Yeah. I'll say too, it's not quite ready to demo. We're redoing this page. So right now, this is this list of the different meal plans, and you can imagine that if you had a lot of these meal plans, it would become a long list. And it's going to be, very soon, it will be a more drag and drop folder kind of interface like you might be used to on a PC or a Mac, where you can organize. And in that case, you can make things like template meal plans in a template folder that you then can clone and pull out and keep separate. Other questions out there? Okay. Well, I did want to say quickly that at any time, if you want to reach out, my contact information is here. I'm the customer support, so you can reach me anytime. Phone number and email address is there, and I'm happy to run through any of this again as well, or if you and your team need a more in-depth training on one of the features, I'm happy to find a time to connect and make sure we do that. If you haven't already, there's a 2-week free trial. You don't need to put down your credit card or any information like that. Just need to verify your email address and you should be good to go. And finally, just spread the word. We're a small organization getting off the ground in our first 3 to 4 years, and getting the word out to all of the people that this could potentially help is one of the more challenging parts of the job. So anybody that you think might benefit from this, please do feel free to share the word with them. So with that, I'll let you be, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining, and do feel free to reach out to me at any point after this, and I'd be happy to help you out. Thanks again for everything, and take care.